In today's SharePoint top tip video, we're going to take a look at SharePoint document approvals and how to improve them. As you can see in the video here, you can create a document library within SharePoint and activate content approval. The downside of this feature out of the box is it doesn't come with any notifications or emails to tell you when something is pending. We know we can add web parts onto landing pages. We could use filters on views to only show the pending content. However, we want something with a notification. So in this example, we're going to use Microsoft Power Automate in SharePoint to create a very small, helpful workflow that allows you to send the notifications, but also allow the user to action that by approving and rejecting directly from Power Automate. So let's begin. As you might have saw in the example video, we already have a document library with the out-of-the-box content approval enabled. As we're going to be using Power Automate, that's where we're going to begin. Using your app launcher in the top left-hand corner, you want to identify where Power Automate is as a solution. You may have to click All Apps. I'm going to go ahead and click on Power Automate. Once Power Automate loads, you want to go ahead and click on the Create button from the left-hand side. From the available options at the top, you're going to be looking for the option to automate the cloud workflow. And we'll give a workflow a name. In this example, it'll be Content Approval. Once you have named your workflow, we now need to select the trigger, which will begin the workflow process. There's a few different options for this, but the one we'll be looking for today is when a file is created or modified, properties only. So we'll type that into the search box. Now you can obviously come up a little bit short by putting when a file is created, and you can then see the different options that are below. Actually, the example that we're going to be doing is slightly further down, and it's this one here where it says when a file is created or modified, properties only. And we need that for the properties to tell us what the status is of the approval. I'll go ahead and select that, hit create, and that'll take us into the canvas. What we'll need to do is we'll need to configure each of the trigger operators. So we'll click on the site address and pick the site we want to connect to. From the drop-down, we'll select the approval document library. And if you wish your workflow to only begin within a particular folder, you can select that next option. We're going to leave it blank as we're going to do the whole entire library. The next part of this workflow underneath new step is to add a condition. The reason we're adding a condition in may be because in this document library, you have the ability to have drafts. What that means is when it goes through the condition, we only want to go and set the document for approval or start the approval process when the document is set to pending. If you're using a document library that has major and minor versioning on, when you update a document or when you create a document, the state of the document will be a draft. However, the only time we want our workflow to begin is when the document is equal to pending. So in the condition, I'll look for the content approval status. Now you can obviously scroll down and identify the columns that are available on your document library. However, you can search at the top. By typing in content, it comes up with the content approval status is equal to, and we'll type in pending. And that means our workflow will only ever begin if the status is equal to pending. If it does not, the workflow will simply just end on the right hand side. However, if it is, we'll go down the left hand side to continue our workflow. The next action that we'll need to add to the workflow will be the ability to send an email. For this, we go down the left hand side. When a document is equal to pending, we wish to send an email. So when you add an action, you can search for a few different email options. When you do type in email, it does give you quite a few. For today's example, we're just going to use the Office 365 Outlook data connector. And then from the available options, we can use a few. There's send an email and send an email with options. Now, what I'd like to do for today's example is use send email with an options to show you how a manager or a user can approve and reject a document directly from within Outlook. So I'm going to go ahead and click this one. Who do I want to send it to? This could be obviously a numerous amount of people. It could be your manager, and there could be a people picker within your SharePoint site. This can be done various different ways. Now, in today's example, to keep it nice and short, I am just going to send it to myself. Perfect. And in the subject line, I'm just going to document approval is required. There we go. So in the user options, we just have to split them using commas. So we'll type in approve and reject. That'll give us two users to give to the user. Now we can go into a lot more detail in regards to this and show advanced options. You can make a very detailed body, including the URL to the actual file itself so the manager can get directed to it. And you may also want to do the document as an attachment. There's a few different options here. However, in today's example, we'll just keep it nice and simple and show you how the premise of this would work. You might want to do this in much more detail in the future. However, in the comments below, if you are interested in working out these additional steps, please let us know and we'll certainly put a little video together for you. Once the send an email options is in, what we have to do is add in another condition. So add an action, put in a condition, and the reason for this is going to be based upon the outcome of the email. The outcome of the email, we may have to wait for that to change. So in the condition, you do select options is equal to, and we'll type in approve. So only when the user that gets the email decides on the outcome, if that is equal to approve, we'll go down the left-hand side. And if it equals to rejected, we'll go down the right-hand side. So nice and simple. Now the last little part to this is once they approve the email, we have to then update the status within the SharePoint document library. And this is where it gets a little bit trickier. So we'd suggest at this point saving your work. So just remember in the top right-hand corner, you can click save to regularly make sure your workflows are saved. Although it does do it automatically, it's still worth saving manually. So moving on to what I would class as the final part of the Power Automate is setting the content approval status based upon the outcome of the email. Now moving down that left hand side now, if we add an action, now there's two different actions we have to add into here. The first one is get metadata. After typing in get metadata, you're looking for the get file metadata action. This is going to be useful for getting the E tag, which we'll later use in the next action. Point it towards the site address, which will be of your SharePoint site. And by putting in the file identifier, this will allow us to then identify that file. So on the right hand side, you may have to type it in. What you're looking for is identifier. So I can see it here by just searching for IDE, the starting words of identifier. This will pull up the column that I'm looking for. And that's it. That'll get the file metadata for us. So moving on to the final action, what we can now do is we can search for set content. As it comes up, there it is there, the SharePoint action to set the content approval status. So I'll select on that, adding in the action, and we just point it all back towards the library. So we point it towards our SharePoint site first of all. We pick our document library. We put in the ID of the item, which here is at the bottom. And the action we set to approve. And that's it. So those are obviously the required fields. However, there's still one extra one we have to do here for this to work. So at the bottom, if we are working with files and pages, you will have to add the E tag. And that was the reason why we got the get file metadata action. So by putting the cursor into the E tag option and having a look within the get file metadata here on the right hand side, we can see the E tag option is there. And we need to put that in. And that's it. That would be your workflow now completed. There's certainly a lot more you can do to the workflow in regards to making the email a bit better to the manager, getting the manager based upon the logged in user or the created by user, and even down the right hand side as well, you might want to also have exactly the same for the rejected. There's a couple of things you can do to speed that up, but I'll just go ahead and quickly add them in now. Fantastic. And as you can now see, with having both of them in, that completes the workflow. So it's now time for testing. So testing the workflow is very simple. Firstly, just ensure that you have saved your workflow in the top right hand corner. And then what we would suggest is once your workflow is saved, is just clicking on the back button here to go to the previous page. What this will do is it will show you the workflow history. And if you want to see at what point the workflow is at, in here, it'll highlight that for you. So I'm going to keep this open in the background while we test. So jumping back into our SharePoint site, what we can now do is we can now create a document for our document library. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to upload a document from my computer. And I added a simple business analytics document. Now, as you can see, the approval status has went straight to pending. That means our workflow should begin and I should be receiving an email notification. To action the email, you can either go to Office 365 and use the Mail Online client, or you can action it from the Outlook email that you receive on your desktop. Here is now an example of what an email would look like in the desktop application. You can now go ahead and click on the Approve button from either the display card at the top or from the actual main body at the bottom. This will differ based upon the options that you use within the actual Power Automate, but this is the default for the one that we selected. So I'll go ahead and click on the Approve button. And that's my action now complete. By doing so, the workflow will now continue through its process. And as we can now see, once we refresh the browser in SharePoint, the approval status has automatically changed to approved. So this is just one of the really good ways of being able to add in an additional step by using Power Automate. This will send out email notifications, and if you wanted to, allows the user to then approve or reject directly from the emails. We hope you found this useful, but certainly as you can see, there's more actions that we could add to this to create a lot more depth. If you would like to know more in regards to training or consultancy, or how you can maybe implement this into your own organisation, why not call one of our experts today who'd be happy to help.